In a distant universe, where stars are not just points of light, but portals to unknown dimensions, a crew of explorers faces a mystery that could change the fate of humanity. What secrets does Planet X, 427, hold? Why did the ship's transmissions disappear without a trace? And most importantly, what or who awaits them in the darkness of deep space? Prepare for a journey filled with intrigue, danger, and discoveries that will challenge everything you thought you knew about the cosmos. This is a science fiction story that will take you beyond the limits of imagination. The silence of space was deceptive. Though there was no sound in the vacuum, the sense of stillness was only an illusion. Inside the starship Eclipse, the constant hum of warp engines echoed through every corner of the metal hull. The crew of 6 had been traveling for months toward the Planet X, 427, a recently discovered world in the far reaches of the galaxy. Their mission was simple: explore, collect data, and if possible, make contact with any intelligent life forms. Captain Alara Voss, a silver-haired woman with eyes that seemed to contain the wisdom of 1,000 stars, sat in the cockpit. Her hands glided over the holographic controls, adjusting the ship's trajectory. Beside her, pilot Jackson Reed, a young but experienced man, watched the screens intently. "How much longer?" Jackson asked, breaking the silence. "About 6 hours," Alara replied, not taking her eyes off the data flowing before her. "But something doesn't add up." "What do you mean?" "The planet's readings are strange. The atmosphere seems stable, but there's a residual energy I can't identify." Jackson frowned. "Do you think it could be dangerous?" "I don't know," Alara admitted. "But we can't afford to underestimate the unknown." Meanwhile, in the ship's laboratory, lead scientist Dr. Alara Quinn was analyzing samples of stardust collected during the voyage. Her assistant, an android named Nexus 7, was helping her with precise calculations. "Nexus, have you noticed anything unusual about these samples?" Alara asked, adjusting her glasses. "Yes, doctor," the android replied in a monotone. "There are traces of an unknown element. It doesn't match any records in the database." Alara smiled, excited by the prospect of a groundbreaking discovery. This could change everything we know about the makeup of the universe. Elsewhere on the ship, Chief Engineer Torin Malek was working on engine maintenance. He was a burly man with calloused hands and a brilliant mind. Beside him, Communications Officer Lyra Solis was trying to establish contact with base on Earth. "Any signs?" Torin asked, wiping his hands on a rag. "Nothing," Lyra replied, frustrated. "It's like something's interfering with the transmissions." "Do you think it could be the planet?" "I don't know, but I don't like it." The last member of the crew, security expert Cale Draven, was in the weapons room, checking equipment. He was a taciturn man, but his presence inspired confidence. He knew that in space, preparation was the key to survival. As the Eclipse approached the Planet X, 427, tensions on board increased. Everyone felt like they were on the verge of something big, something that could change their lives forever. But there was also a sense of unease, as if the universe was warning them that not everything was as it seemed. Planet X, 427, appeared on the horizon, a world of blues and greens, shrouded in a mysterious haze. Eclipse entered orbit, and the crew gathered in the cockpit to discuss the plan of action. "According to the scanners, the atmosphere is breathable," Alara said, projecting a holographic image of the planet. "But there are areas of high radiation that we must avoid." "What about the residual energy?" Jackson asked. "It's still there, and it's stronger than I thought. We can't ignore it. So what do we do?" Torin asked, crossing his arms. "We'll split up the team," Alara decided. "Jackson, Lyra, and I will go to the surface. Torin, Cale, and Alara will stay on the ship to monitor the situation." "And me?" Nexus 7 asked. "You stay with Alara. We need you to analyze any data we receive." The exploration team quickly prepared, equipping themselves with special suits and research tools. As they descended in the shuttle toward the planet's surface, a sense of anticipation filled the air. The landscape that greeted them was surreal. Crystalline mountains rose on the horizon, and rivers of bright liquid meandered across the ground. The sky was a deep violet, and the sun, a distant star, emitted a faint but warm light. "This is incredible," Lyra murmured, recording everything with her camera. "Stay alert," Alara warned. "We don't know what's here." As they explored, they found structures that looked like they were made by an advanced civilization. They were buildings made of a material similar to glass, but more resistant. In the center of a plaza, there was an obelisk that emitted a pulsating glow. "That must be the source of the residual energy," Jackson said, approaching carefully. "Don't touch anything," Alara ordered, but it was too late. As they approached, Jackson activated a hidden mechanism. The obelisk began to emit a deep rumble, and the ground beneath their feet trembled. Suddenly, a blinding light enveloped them, and everything went black. When Alara opened her eyes, she found herself in a place she didn't recognize. She wasn't on Planet X, 427, nor on the ship. She was in some sort of circular chamber, with walls that seemed to be made of pure energy. "Jackson? Lyra?" he called, but there was no answer. Suddenly, a voice echoed in his mind. It was not a sound, but a presence, as if someone or something was communicating directly with his thoughts. "Welcome, traveler," the voice said. "You have reached the threshold." "Who are you?" Alara asked, trying to remain calm. "We are the Guardians. We have been waiting for you." "For me? For what?" "Because you are the key. The fate of the universe is in your hands." Before Alara could respond, a series of images flooded her mind. She saw ancient civilizations, interstellar wars, and a cataclysmic event that threatened to destroy everything that existed. "What is this?" she asked, confused. "It's the future," the voice replied, "and it's up to you to change it." Meanwhile, on the ship, Torin and Alara were trying to understand what had happened. The readings showed that the exploration team had disappeared without a trace. "Where are they?" Alara asked desperately. "I don't know," Torin replied, "but we're going to find them." Kale, who had been silent, finally spoke up. "There's something else. The energy readings are increasing. If we don't do something soon, this ship could be destroyed." Alara looked at Nexus 7. "Can you track his signal?" "I'll try," the android said, connecting to the ship's systems. Meanwhile, in the chamber, Alara began to understand her role. The Guardians explained to her that the Planet X, 427, was a portal to other dimensions, and that the residual energy was the result of a cosmic battle that had occurred eons ago. "You must choose," the Guardians said. "You can close the portal and save your universe, or open it and join us in a new reality." Alara knew that her decision would not only affect her crew, but all of existence. Time seemed to stand still in the chamber. Alara felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. With every passing second, the images of the future became clearer. She saw worlds destroyed, entire civilizations disappearing into an abyss of darkness. But she also saw hope, a ray of light shining through the chaos. "How can I close the portal?" she asked, determined. "You must find the core," the voice replied. "It is at the heart of the planet. But be careful. There are forces that do not want you to close it." "What forces?" "The Devourers, beings that feed on dimensional energy. If they find you, you will have no escape." Alara nodded, even though she knew she couldn't see the Guardians. "So how do I get to the core?" "We will guide you, but you must trust us." Suddenly, the camera began to fade, and Alara found herself back on the planet's surface. Jackson and Lyra were beside her, disoriented but unharmed. "What happened?" Jackson asked, rubbing his head. "There is no time for explanations," Alara said. "We have to get to the heart of the planet." "And how do we do that?" Lyra asked. "Follow me." As they moved forward, the landscape began to change. The crystalline mountains became darker, and the air was filled with an oppressive energy. Suddenly, they heard a roar in the distance. "What was that?" Jackson asked, looking around. "The Devourers," Alara replied. "We can't let ourselves be caught." They ran to a nearby cave, but it was not a safe haven. Inside, the walls seemed to be alive, moving and changing shape. "This isn't normal," Lyra murmured. "Nothing here is," Alara said. "But we have no other choice." Meanwhile, back on the ship, Torin and Alara were working against the clock to stabilize the systems. Residual power was affecting the engines, and if they didn't do something soon, the Eclipse could be stranded in orbit. Nexus, can you calculate an escape route? Torin asked. I will try, the android replied. But I need more time. We don't have time, Kale said. If we don't leave soon, we won't be able to help Alara and the others. Alara looked at Torin, worried. Do you think they can do it? I don't know, Torin replied. But we have to trust them. The cave led them into an underground tunnel that seemed to stretch on forever. The walls gave off a dim glow, illuminating the way, but also creating shadows that moved eerily. Alara led the group, with Jackson and Lyra following close behind. How much longer? Lyra asked, panting. I don't know, Alara replied. But we must move on. Suddenly, the tunnel opened into a gigantic chamber. In the center, there was a structure that looked like an altar with a crystal floating in the air. It was the core. That's it, Alara said, approaching carefully. What now? Jackson asked. I have to close the portal. But I need time. Then we've got you covered, Lyra said, drawing her gun. Alara nodded and walked over to the crystal. As she did so, a surge of energy washed over her, and she felt an immediate connection to the core. She began to receive images and emotions, as if the crystal was trying to communicate with her. Understand, he murmured. I must balance the energies. As he worked, Jackson and Lyra kept watch at the entrance to the chamber. It wasn't long before they heard noises coming from the tunnel. Something's coming, Jackson said, aiming his gun. Be ready, Lyra warned. The Devourers appeared, grotesque creatures that seemed to be made of pure shadow and energy. They advanced quickly, their intentions clearly hostile. Shoot, Jackson shouted, opening fire. Lyra followed, but the bullets seemed to have no effect on the creatures. It's not working, Lyra screamed desperately. Keep trying, Jackson replied, reloading his gun. Meanwhile, Alara was in a trance, completely focused on her task. She knew that if she failed, not only would they die, but the entire universe would be in danger. I almost have it, he murmured, feeling the energies beginning to balance. But then, one of the Devourers managed to get past and lunged at her. Alara, watch out, Jackson shouted, but it was too late. The creature struck her, severing her connection to the core. Alara fell to the ground, stunned, as the crystal began to glow unsteadily. No, he screamed, trying to get up. At that moment, a voice echoed through the chamber. It was Nexus 7, who had managed to establish a connection through the ship's systems. Captain, I can help you, the android said, but I need you to give me full access to the core. How? Alara asked, confused. Trust me. Alara hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. Do it. Nexus 7 began transmitting a series of codes into the crystal, stabilizing the energies. The Devourers fell back, as if they were being repelled by an invisible force. It works, Lyra cried, relieved. But not for long, Nexus 7 warned. You must close the portal now. Alara stood up, determined. With a final effort, she managed to re-establish her connection to the core and complete the process. The crystal glowed with a blinding light, and then everything was still. The Devourers disappeared, and the residual energy dissipated. The portal was closed. We did it, Alara muttered, exhausted. Jackson and Lyra helped her up, and together they walked out of the chamber. They knew their mission was over, but they also knew they had changed the course of history. The return to the ship was a silent journey. The crew was exhausted, but also filled with a sense of accomplishment. They had faced the unknown and emerged victorious. Arriving at the Eclipse, Torin and Alara greeted them with relief. We thought we lost them, Alara said, hugging Alara. It wasn't easy, Alara replied. But we did it. And the portal? Torin asked. Closed, Jackson said. And it won't open again. Nexus 7 approached, his usual calm. It was an honor to help, Captain. Thank you, Nexus, Alara said, smiling. We couldn't have done it without you. As the ship prepared for the journey back to Earth, Alara stood in the cockpit, looking out at the planet X-427 for the last time. She knew they had done the right thing, but she also knew that the universe was full of mysteries they did not yet understand. What's happening now? Jackson asked, moving closer. Now, Alara replied. We are going home, but this is not the end. It is only the beginning. The journey back to Earth was uneventful, but the Eclipse crew couldn't help but feel that something had changed within them. They hadn't just closed an interdimensional portal, they had touched something bigger, something beyond their understanding. Alara spent long hours in the cockpit, reviewing the data they had collected on Planet X, 427. Even though the portal was closed, the residual energy readings were still intriguing. There was something about those numbers, those fluctuations, that didn't add up. Are you still thinking about that? Jackson asked, entering with 2 cups of synthetic coffee. Yes, Alara replied, accepting a cup. Something doesn't add up. The portal is closed, but the energy hasn't completely dissipated. It's like something else is there. Do you think the Devourers could return? I don't know, but we can't rule anything out. Meanwhile, in the lab, Alara and Nexus 7 worked on the samples they had brought back from the planet. The unknown element they had discovered remained a mystery, but each analysis revealed new layers of complexity. This is incredible, Alara said, staring at the readings on the screen. This element is not only stable, but it appears to have properties that defy the laws of physics. Do you think it could be useful? Nexus 7 asked. Useful is not the word. This could revolutionize everything we know about energy, matter, even time. Elsewhere on the ship, Torin and Kale were checking the ECLIPSE's systems. Though the ship had held up well during the journey, they both knew they couldn't let their guard down. Do you think we're ready for what's next? Kale asked, adjusting a control panel. We never are, Torin replied. But that's what makes this exciting. Lyra, meanwhile, was in her cabin, reviewing the recordings she had made on the planet. The images of the crystalline structures and the obelisk fascinated her, but they also disturbed her. There was something about them, something she couldn't explain. What are you hiding? He muttered, moving closer to the screen. Suddenly, the image of the obelisk began to distort, and a blurry figure appeared in the background. Lyra leaned forward, trying to make out what it was, but before she could, the screen went black. What the hell? He muttered, fiddling with the controls. But the screen remained black. As the eclipse approached Earth, tensions on board increased. Everyone felt that something was about to happen, but they didn't know what. Captain, we have a problem, Torin said, entering the cockpit. What's wrong? Alara asked, standing up from her seat. The energy readings are fluctuating again. It's like something is trying to break through. The portal? I don't know, but it's not normal. Alara frowned. Prepare for anything. We can't take any chances. Meanwhile, in the lab, Alara and Nexus 7 were still working on the samples. Suddenly, the unknown element began to emit an intense glow, and the readings on the screen became chaotic. Nexus, do something, Alara shouted, backing away. I'm trying, the android replied, but its systems seemed to be failing. At that moment, the entire ship shook violently, and the lights flickered. Everyone hold on, Alara shouted over the intercom. The jolt lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough to disorient everyone. When the lights stabilized, Alara ran to the lab. What happened? He asked, finding Alara and Nexus 7 on the ground. The element reacted, Alara said, standing up. I don't know how, but it seems to have activated something. Activated what? I don't know, but it's not good. Meanwhile, in her cabin, Lyra stood in front of the screen, which now showed a clear image of the blurry figure she had seen earlier. It was a creature, but not like the Devourers. This one was different, more human, but with an aura of power that made it seem almost divine. Who are you? Lyra asked, not waiting for an answer. But the figure spoke. I am the Watcher, he said, his voice echoing in Lyra's mind. And you have awakened something that should have lain dormant. The crew gathered in the cockpit, where Lyra showed them the image of the Watcher. They were all in shock, but knew they couldn't ignore what was happening. What does he want? Jackson asked, looking at the picture. I don't know, Lyra replied. But he doesn't seem hostile. At least, not yet. We need to find out more, Alara said. Nexus, can you try to make contact? I'll try, the android replied, connecting to the ship's systems. As Nexus 7 worked, Torin checked the power readings. The fluctuations are increasing. If we don't do something soon, We could be in serious trouble. What do you suggest? Alara asked. We could try to redirect the power, but I don't know if that would work. Do it. We have no other choice. While Torin worked to redirect the power, Nexus 7 managed to establish a connection with the Watcher. Who are you? Alara asked, addressing the figure on screen. I am the Watcher, the figure repeated. And you have awakened something you should not have touched. What are you talking about? The portal they closed was just a part of something bigger, something they can't even understand. So what should we do? You must prepare yourself, because what is coming is not something you can face alone. Before Alara could respond, the connection was cut, and the screen returned to normal. What the hell just happened? Jackson asked, looking at Alara. I don't know, she replied. But whatever it is, we can't ignore it. The Eclipse arrived on Earth, but their return was not what they expected. Instead of being welcomed as heroes, they were placed in quarantine. The authorities did not understand what had happened on Planet X 427, and until they did, the crew could not return to normal. This is ridiculous, Torin said, sitting in a waiting room. We saved the universe, and this is what we get. It's not personal, Alara said. They're just being cautious. Careful, my ass, Jackson muttered. Meanwhile, Alara and Nexus 7 continued to analyze the samples. Although they were under surveillance, no one could stop them from working. There's something else, Alara said, looking at the readings. Something we hadn't noticed before. What is it? Nexus 7 asked. It's as if the element were alive. Alive? Yes. And it seems to be communicating with something. With what? I don't know, but I don't think it's from this universe. At that moment, Alara entered the room. We need to talk. What's wrong? Alara asked. The authorities have decided that we cannot keep the samples. They're going to confiscate them. What? You can't do that. I'm sorry, but we have no choice. Alara looked at Nexus 7, then at Alara. So what do we do? We're getting ready, Alara said. Because whatever comes next, we're not going to sit back and do nothing. The confiscation of the samples was a hard blow for the Eclipse crew. Although they understood the authorities' reasons, they knew they were missing a unique opportunity to understand what they had found on the Planet X 427. We can't just let them take everything, Alara said, watching the government scientists pack up the samples. There's something in that element that could change everything. I know, Alara replied, her voice calm but firm. But for now, we must play by their rules. What if they're not ready for what they have? Jackson asked, crossing her arms. That's their problem, Alara said. Our priority is to make sure we're ready for what's coming. Meanwhile, at a secret government facility, samples began to be analyzed. Scientists were fascinated by the properties of the unknown element, but also concerned about its instability. This is incredible, said one of the scientists, looking at the readings, but also dangerous. Do you think it could be used as a weapon? Another asked. I don't know, but we can't underestimate him. Elsewhere in the facility, a group of high-ranking officers were discussing the situation. What do we do with the Eclipse crew? One asked. We're keeping an eye on them, another replied. They know too much, and we can't risk them talking. What if they try to do something? Then we stop them. Meanwhile, Alara and her team were constantly monitored. They knew they could not trust the authorities, but they also knew they could not act openly. We have to find a way to recover the samples, Alara said quietly as they walked through the halls of the facility. It won't be easy, Alara replied, but it won't be impossible. Do you have a plan? Not yet, but I will have it. Night fell on the facility, and the Eclipse crew secretly met in one of the warehouses. They knew they could trust no one but themselves. We have to act quickly, Alara said, looking at each of them. If we don't, we could lose everything we've gained. What do you suggest? Torin asked. We need to distract the guards and access the laboratory where the samples are. And how do we do that? Lyra and Jackson will create a diversion at the other end of the facility. Torin and I will take care of retrieving the samples. Alara and Nexus 7 will cover us from here. What if they catch us? Lyra asked. Then we'll have to improvise, Alara replied. But we can't just sit back and do nothing. The plan was put into motion. Lyra and Jackson caused a short circuit in one of the power systems, causing alarms to sound at the other end of the facility. While the guards ran to investigate, Alara and Torin headed to the lab. Stay alert, Alara said, opening the door with a device Nexus 7 had provided them. Inside the lab, the samples were kept in a special container. Torin quickly opened it and began taking out the samples. We have to hurry, Alara said, looking toward the door. We're almost done, Torin replied, placing the last of the samples into a backpack. At that moment, the door opened and a group of guards entered the laboratory. Stop, one of them shouted, pointing his weapons at Alara and Torin. We have no choice, Alara said, pulling a small device out of her pocket. What is that? Torin asked, looking at the device. A gift from Nexus, Alara replied, activating it. The device emitted an energy wave that rendered the guards unconscious. Come on, Alara said, running toward the door. Torin followed her, and together they managed to leave the facility undetected. Back on the Eclipse, the crew gathered to discuss their next move. They knew they couldn't stay on Earth, but they couldn't leave without a plan either. What do we do now? Jackson asked, looking at Alara. We have to go, she replied. But we can't do it without a destination. What if we go back to Planet X for 27? Alara suggested. Because? Because there's something there that we don't understand. Something that could be the key to all of this. It's not a bad idea, Torin said, but will be dangerous. Everything we've done has been dangerous, Alara replied. But we have no other choice. As they prepared the ship for takeoff, Nexus 7 approached Alara. Captain, there is something you should know, the android said. What's wrong, Nexus? I've been analyzing the samples, and something doesn't fit. What is it? The element seems to be changing. Changing how? I don't know, but it's not stable. Alara frowned. Then we have to hurry. The Eclipse took off secretly, avoiding the authorities' radar. They knew they were committing an act of rebellion, but they also knew it was necessary. Heading for Planet X, 427, Alara said, adjusting the controls. Here we go, Jackson murmured, looking up at the stars. The trip back to Planet X, 427, was quicker than expected, thanks to the improvements Torin had made to the warp engines. But as they got closer, the tension on board increased. Power readings are increasing, Nexus 7 said, watching the screens. Is this the portal? Alara asked. I don't know, but something is happening. When they arrived at the planet, they were in for a surprise. The obelisk they had seen earlier was active again, and a pulsating light emanated from its base. What's going on? Lyra asked, looking up at the surface. I don't know, Alara replied, but we'll find out. The exploration team descended in the shuttle, preparing for whatever they might find. They knew they could make no mistakes, but they also knew they had no other choice. Stay together, Alara said, leading the group toward the obelisk. When they arrived, they were met with a scene that left them speechless. The obelisk was surrounded by humanoid figures, but they were not like the Devourers. These creatures seemed to be made of light, and their movements were fluid and harmonious. Who are they? Jackson asked, looking at Alara. I don't know, she replied, but they don't seem hostile. One of the figures approached them, and a voice echoed in their minds. They've returned, the figure said. We knew they would. Who are you? Alara asked. We are the creators, the figure replied, and you have awakened something you should not have touched. The revelation of the creators left the Eclipse crew in shock. These creatures of light claimed to be responsible for the creation of the portal and the unknown element. Why do they do this? Alara asked, trying to remain calm. To protect the balance, one of the figures replied. But something has gone wrong. What went wrong? The element they found should never have been discovered. It is an essential part of the fabric of the universe, and tampering with it could have catastrophic consequences. So what should we do? They must help us restore balance. But will be dangerous. We have no other choice, Alara said, looking at her crew. Are you ready? They all nodded, knowing they couldn't back down. Then let us begin, said the figure of light, guiding them towards the obelisk. The creators explained that the unknown element was a form of pure energy capable of altering reality itself. But its manipulation had triggered a chain reaction that threatened to destroy the balance of the universe. We must close the portal permanently, one of the figures said. But to do so, we need your help. What should we do? Alara asked. You must enter the portal and find the primordial core. Only there will you be able to stop the chain reaction. What if we don't? Then the universe as you know it will cease to exist. The crew knew they had no other choice. With determination, they prepared to enter the portal. Stay together, Alara said, looking at each of them. We don't know what's on the other side. Here we go, Jackson murmured, following Alara toward the portal. The portal's interior was a labyrinth of light and energy. The crew moved carefully, following the creator's directions. How much further? Lyra asked, looking around. I don't know, Alara replied. But we must move on. Suddenly, they found themselves in front of a gigantic door, made of a material that seemed alive. This is the primordial core, a voice said in their minds. You must enter. Alara pushed open the door, and they found themselves in a chamber filled with pure energy. At the center was a gigantic crystal, pulsating with an intense glow. That's it, Alara said, approaching. We need to deactivate it. How? Torin asked. I don't know, but we have to try. As they worked, a dark figure appeared in the chamber. It was a devourer, but larger and more powerful than any they had seen. Careful, Jackson shouted, aiming his gun. The devourer lunged at them. But Alara managed to activate a device Nexus 7 had given them. The device emitted a wave of energy that repelled the devourer, but did not stop it completely. Hurry, Alara shouted, working on the glass. With a last-ditch effort, they managed to deactivate the primordial core. The portal began to collapse, and the crew ran for the exit. The collapse of the portal took them back to the planet X-427, where the creators were waiting for them. They have done it, said one of the figures. They have restored the balance. What now? Alara asked. Now, you must return to your world. But remember, the universe is a vast place full of mysteries. Not all of them are meant to be discovered. The crew nodded, knowing they had learned a valuable lesson. Thank you, Alara said, looking at the creators. We will not forget you. Neither do we to you, the figure replied, fading into the light. The return to Earth was smooth, but the crew knew their lives would never be the same. They had touched something bigger than themselves, and it had changed them forever. What do we do now? Jackson asked, looking up at the stars. We continue exploring, Alara replied, but with more caution. What if we find something like this again? Then we will face it together. As ECLIPSE entered Earth's atmosphere, the crew prepared for what was to come. They knew the universe was full of dangers, but also wonders. The ECLIPSE crew were greeted as heroes, but also as enigmas. The authorities did not fully understand what they had experienced, but they knew they were important. Thank you for your service, said a high-ranking officer, shaking Alara's hand. We just did what we had to do, she replied with a smile. Meanwhile, Alara and Nexus 7 continued to analyze the samples they had recovered. Although the primordial core had been deactivated, they knew there was much more to discover. This isn't the end, Alara said, looking up at the stars. It's just the beginning. Alara joined them, looking out into the horizon. She knew that the universe was a vast place, full of mystery, but also of possibility. Here we go, he murmured, feeling the wind on his face. Thank you for joining us on this incredible adventure. If you like this story, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and leave us a comment. Until next time, explorers.